You've probably heard it all before, haven't you? A drink won't hurt, they said. It's just a way to relax, to take the edge off. But let me ask you something. Has anyone ever told you what alcohol really does? Beyond the liver, beyond the hangovers, beyond the jokes and the toasts? I'm not here to lecture you or wave a finger in your face. That's not how grown men talk to each other. No, this is a conversation, one man to another. Because you've lived long enough to know when something doesn't quite sit right. Even if no one dares to say it out loud. You've felt it, haven't you? That subtle shift after a few drinks, not just the buzz. Not just the loosened tongue, but quiet thinning of yourself. Like you're not fully there. Like a piece of you steps back. They told us it was harmless. Even sophisticated. But what if I told you that was part of the design? That long before alcohol ever touched your lips. It had already touched your mind. It was never just a drink. It was a script, handed to you by a system that profits from your disconnection. Think back. Remember those family gatherings where adults raised their glasses high, laughing, clinking, while you, as a boy, watched from the sidelines? You didn't understand the taste back then, but you understood the ritual. The drink wasn't just liquid, it was a symbol, a ticket to adulthood. You learned early, to celebrate, to grieve, to belong. You needed to participate. It wasn't sold to you as a sedative, it was sold as a rite of passage. But no one mentioned what passage you were walking through. They never told you it wasn't just easing you into manhood, it was easing you away from yourself. What most people don't realize is that the word alcohol comes from an ancient Arabic term. Al-Kul. It wasn't a drink, it was a fine black powder, used around the eyes, and more importantly, it was a term used by alchemists to describe distillation, the process of drawing the spirit out of matter. Now, that might sound poetic, but it's not just a metaphor. The ancients knew something we've forgotten. Distillation doesn't just extract essence from plants or grains. It symbolizes extracting the soul from the body. That's why even today, we call alcoholic drinks spirits. It's not clever wordplay. It's an echo from a time when people understood that substances like alcohol could literally separate you from your spiritual core. But here's where it gets uncomfortable. That ancient knowledge wasn't lost by accident. It was buried. Over time, the sacred became casual. What was once a tool of spiritual transformation was repackaged as weekend entertainment. You see, in those old initiation ceremonies, only the trained were allowed to work with alcohol. They knew the risk. They knew misuse could open doors that you couldn't close. But modern society? It tossed away the key and flung those doors wide open. I know what you might be thinking. You're no fool. You've heard people talk about moderation, balance, everything in its place. But this isn't about the number of drinks. This is about what happens in the layers of you that no one sees. Every time you sip, you're not just relaxing, you're altering your frequency, disturbing the energetic field that protects your intuition, your clarity, your sovereignty. That's not spiritual mumbo-jumbo. It's practical reality. You've lived long enough to know that sometimes you can sense when something's off, when a room feels heavy, when a person's energy doesn't sit right. That's your field talking. Alcohol doesn't just mute that signal, it weakens the very antenna you use to navigate this world. You ever wonder why, after a night of drinking, you wake up feeling more than just tired? It's not the dehydration. It's not just the physical hangover. It's that hollow, scattered feeling, like pieces of you are still floating around, not fully returned. That's because alcohol doesn't punch you in the gut, it erodes you softly. You feel lighter in the moment. But behind that ease, you're loosening threads that keep you grounded. Every drink makes your boundaries just a little more porous. And you don't notice it until you've drifted far from where you began. And because it feels good in the moment, you don't question the erosion. You welcome it. Now, I'm not here to scare you with ghost stories about possession or superstitions. But I will tell you this, when your energetic field fractures, it becomes a doorway, and not all that walks through is welcome. Across cultures, from shamans to mystics to hermetic philosophers, there's a consistent warning: when you alter your state without discipline, you invite influences that thrive on your disconnection. They called them obsessing spirits, astral parasites, subnatural beings. The names don't matter. The pattern does. These entities feed on chaos, on lowered consciousness, and alcohol, by design, makes you an easier target. You've seen it yourself. Think of someone you knew who drank to the point where they weren't themselves anymore. The empty stare. The erratic behavior. You could feel it. That wasn't them. That was someone else operating through the cracks. But the most dangerous intrusions aren't dramatic. They're subtle. They slip in as compulsive thoughts. Self-doubt. Emotional instability. You think the urge to reach for another drink is just habit. But what if it's being whispered into your ear by something that benefits from your detachment? Here's the part that gets under the skin. This system, the ads, the movies, the culture that celebrates alcohol, it doesn't want you to know this. Because when you numb yourself, you become compliant, manageable, easy to market to, easy to manipulate. Sovereign men who stand fully present in their energy, are a problem for systems built on distraction and consumption. That's why alcohol is sold as a symbol of freedom, when in truth, it's a leash made of silk. Comfortable, familiar, but a leash nonetheless. But you're starting to see through it. That's why you're here. You've felt the dissonance, that quiet knowing that something doesn't add up. You've lived long enough to know that real freedom doesn't come in a bottle. It comes in presence, in clarity. And clarity, my friend, is the one thing the world never taught you how to protect. They trained you to guard your wallet, your reputation, your health, but they never taught you how to guard your energetic field. They didn't want you to know that your intuition, your discernment, your inner compass, those are your real assets. And every drink chips away at them. But it's not too late. Energy isn't static. It responds. It heals when given the right conditions. The first step isn't about quitting alcohol out of fear or guilt. That's just another trap. The first step is awareness. Seeing the illusion for what it is. Recognizing that the version of you that alcohol pretends to unlock isn't trapped behind a glass. It's always been there. It's you. Unfiltered, untouched, unburdened by layers of cultural programming. You see, the culture doesn't celebrate clarity because clear people can't be controlled. They can't be sold distractions because they don't crave an escape. They're not easy targets for shallow marketing tactics or hollow promises. That's the kind of man you're waking up to be. Not a man who needs to numb his edges to feel comfortable in his own skin. But a man who knows that every edge, every discomfort, is an invitation to come home to himself. And I'll tell you this, it's a quieter path. You won't get standing ovations for choosing presence. You might even lose a few drinking buddies along the way. But what you'll gain is far greater. You'll gain yourself, fully. And that's a victory that no one can take from you. The system can sell you 1,000 illusions. But once you've tasted real sovereignty, no amount of noise can drown it out. Now, you and I both know that awakening isn't about grand gestures. It's built in the small, quiet choices you make when no one's watching. Every time you sit with discomfort instead of numbing it, you're reclaiming a piece of your power. Every time you choose clarity over compliance, you're lighting a path for someone else to follow, even if they don't know it yet. You're not broken, my friend. You're not weak for having followed the script they handed you. But now that you see it, you've got a choice. And the man you've always been, the one beneath the conditioning. The one who remembers what true presence feels like, he's been waiting for you to come back. You know, there's a reason nobody tells you what alcohol really costs, not in dollars. But in clarity. They don't want you to know that every time you reach for a drink, you're not just loosening up for a few hours. You're paying with something far more valuable, your awareness. And the bill doesn't come with a receipt. It shows up quietly, in ways you've been taught not to notice. You've probably seen it in others before you ever recognized it in yourself. The man who's sharp as a tack in the morning but slowly fades into a fog by evening. The friend who used to have a gut instinct for reading people, now second-guessing himself after a few drinks. That isn't aging, my friend. That's erosion. Subtle, slow, and, if no one tells you about it, inevitable. But you've always known when something doesn't add up, haven't you? You feel it when conversations lose their depth. When the connection that alcohol promises feels paper thin. You've been handed a script that says, this is how men relax. This is how we bond. But the question no one wants you to ask is, bond with what? Are you truly connecting with your friends, your family, your own self, or are you just synchronizing in shared numbness? That's a tough pill to swallow because the world has been incredibly clever in how it wires this habit into your identity. It started long before you poured your first drink. It started with the TV shows where heroes sipped whiskey to show strength. With movies that told you a glass of scotch was sophistication in liquid form. It was in the family dinners, The barbecues, where the men gathered with a beer in hand, not because they were thirsty, but because that was the unspoken badge of belonging. They made it look natural, even essential. But think about it. Why does something so natural require so much reinforcement? Why is it marketed with such relentless precision? Because the more disconnected you feel, the easier it is to sell you the illusion of connection. This is no accident. Billions have been spent crafting a narrative where alcohol isn't a substance, it's an identity. They made sure you believed that refusing a drink was refusing camaraderie, that abstaining was antisocial, even unmanly. But here's what they never mentioned: real men, sovereign men, are the ones who question the script, not the ones who follow it blindly. They never told you that alcohol is one of the oldest and most efficient tools of compliance. It dulls your discernment, makes you more agreeable, more manageable, not just to those around you, but to the systems that prefer you numbed rather than questioning. And you've reached a point in life where you've earned the right to question. You see, alcohol isn't content with just altering your mood, it infiltrates your patterns. Over time, it rewires the way you approach discomfort. That moment when life feels heavy, when thoughts get too loud. Instead of sitting with it, learning from it, you've been trained to escape it. And alcohol is always waiting in the wings, offering that temporary exit. But exits come with detours. Every time you choose to numb instead of navigate, you stray a little further from the compass inside you. Have you ever noticed how after a few drinks, your reactions change? You laugh louder, speak faster, but inside, a quiet gap opens between your words and your awareness. That's not coincidence, that's by design. Alcohol lowers the defenses that protect your intuitive clarity. And when those boundaries weaken, you're not just opening up to friends, you're opening up to energies, influences, thought patterns that weren't invited. But they don't need an invitation, they just need an opening. That's where it gets uncomfortable. I know, because no one wants to think they've been walking through life with their energetic doors wide open. But ask yourself, how often have you felt drained after a night of drinking? Even if you didn't overdo it? Not just tired, but off, as if something was missing. As if a part of you didn't quite come back home. That's the erosion I'm talking about. It's not a dramatic theft, it's a slow, persistent leak. And leaks are dangerous not because they flood you, but because they go unnoticed until the damage is already done. The hardest part to admit is this: alcohol doesn't come at you with claws and fangs. It doesn't knock you down in a single blow. It seduces you. It feels like release, like freedom, like ease. But the freedom it offers is counterfeit. It's not liberation, it's a subtle form of bondage dressed in the illusion of choice. You feel lighter, more social, more yourself. But what you're actually experiencing is a temporary muting of the very signals that make you sovereign. Confidence doesn't come from alcohol. It comes from knowing who you are, standing in your truth without needing to soften the edges. Alcohol just numbs the noise temporarily, but when it wears off, the noise returns, louder and more chaotic. And here's where it becomes a cycle. You wake up, not fully connected, slightly off-center, and the easiest path back to normal feels like another drink. Not because you're weak, not because you're addicted in the way they define addiction, but because you've been conditioned to believe that your ease, your calm, your joy, lives at the bottom of a glass. But it never did. It was always inside you, buried beneath the layers of noise you've been trained to suppress rather than confront. Now, let's get something straight. This isn't about demonizing pleasure. Life is meant to be enjoyed. But there's a difference between pleasure that uplifts and pleasure that sedates. The former connects you to your essence, makes you more alive. The latter pulls you away from it, even if it feels good in the moment. The system has cleverly taught you to chase the second. Because sedated men are easier to manage. They don't ask hard questions. They don't disrupt patterns. They don't reclaim their sovereignty. But you're not here to be managed. Are you? You're here to live fully. To stand clear and grounded in who you are. And that clarity, my friend, is the one thing they don't want you to reclaim. Because when you do, the game changes. You become the kind of man who can't be easily swayed by clever ads. Who doesn't need an external substance to feel whole. Who sees through the noise and chooses presence over performance. It won't be easy. The culture doesn't celebrate sobriety, not the kind I'm talking about. Sure, they'll applaud you for abstaining after a health scare or a DUI. But spiritual clarity? They don't know what to do with that. You'll hear the jokes, the subtle jabs. Oh, come on, Live a little. But the truth is, you're living more than they are. Because while they're chasing artificial highs, you're learning to feel fully alive without the filter. And that's a power they won't understand until they see it reflected back in your presence. The more you choose clarity, the more you'll notice how much of the world is trapped in cycles of escapism. You'll start to see how distractions are sold to you at every turn, not just alcohol, but screens, noise, shallow entertainment, all designed to pull you away from yourself. But you'll also start to feel something else, a quiet strength that builds with every moment you stay present. Your intuition sharpens, your discernment becomes second nature. The fog that once made decisions feel heavy begins to lift. And when you sit with yourself, fully, without the crutch of numbing, you'll find that the discomfort you used to avoid isn't your enemy. It's your guide. It's pointing you to the parts of yourself that are ready to heal. Every knot in your chest, every restless thought, it's not a problem to drown. It's a message asking to be heard. And when you listen, when you meet it head on, you begin to patch the leaks in your energetic field. You become less reactive, more grounded. You stop absorbing energies that don't belong to you. And you start reclaiming the pieces of yourself that you thought were lost. The world has trained you to seek quick fixes. But you've lived long enough to know that real solutions aren't fast. They're deep. And presence, that's as deep as it gets. It's not glamorous. It doesn't come with applause. But it comes with something far more valuable, yourself. Whole and unfiltered. And that's worth more than any temporary high the world can offer. So the next time the script tries to pull you back, the next time a drink is presented as the answer to a long day, a tough emotion, a social expectation, I want you to remember this conversation. Remember that you're not refusing a drink. You're choosing yourself. You're choosing clarity. You're choosing to stand in a world that prefers you seated. And every time you do, you're not just changing yourself. You're lighting a path for others. Even if they don't know it yet. You've come this far. And by now, I know something inside you has shifted. Maybe it's just a whisper. Maybe it's a full-on realization. But either way, you're seeing it now. Aren't you? The truth that was always hiding in plain sight. Alcohol wasn't just a drink. It was a mask. And the world trained you to wear it so well that you forgot what your real face looked like underneath. But here's the good news. The mask doesn't own you. It never did. You can put it down anytime. And the moment you do, you'll begin to feel something that this culture rarely speaks of, your own unfiltered presence. It's not an easy path. If it were, everyone would be walking it. But you've earned the right to walk a path that most never even see. You've lived through the noise, the conditioning, the endless promises that something outside of you could make you whole. And now, you're ready to walk it back, to reclaim what was yours all along. The first thing you'll notice when you step into clarity is how much quieter life becomes, not boring, not empty, but spacious. The frantic hum of distraction starts to fade. And in its place, you hear something far more powerful, your own intuition. You remember what that is, don't you? That gut feeling you could always trust before the drinks. The noise, and the self-doubt started piling on top of it. As the fog lifts, you realize your instincts never left. They were just waiting for you to clear the channel. And when that channel clears, life takes on a different rhythm. You stop reacting to every little tug from the outside world. You start responding from within. But here's what they don't tell you about this process. It's not glamorous. It's gritty. You'll sit in silence and feel discomfort rise. Not because you're failing, but because you're finally hearing the messages you've been muting for years. Every ache, every knot of tension, every restless night is your system recalibrating, realigning. And while the world calls it withdrawal, I call it return. You're not losing anything. You're coming back home. You're reclaiming the parts of you that you gave away piece by piece. Sip by sip, you see, what alcohol offered you was a shortcut, a quick path to a false version of freedom. But real freedom isn't quick. It's built breath by breath, choice by choice, and every time you choose to stay present when it would be easier to numb. You're not just building discipline, you're forging sovereignty. You're proving to yourself that you are enough, exactly as you are, without needing to soften your edges or blur your focus. And when that realization takes root, something remarkable happens. You become unshakable, not in an arrogant, loud way, but in a quiet, grounded way that people can feel before you even say a word. And let me tell you, that presence, it changes everything. People will notice it, even if they can't explain what's different. They'll sense a steadiness in you, A clarity that's rare in a world addicted to noise. You'll find that conversations deepen. Relationships become more authentic, not because you're trying harder, but because you're fully there. No more masking, no more performing, just you, present and unapologetic. But I won't sugarcoat it. There will be moments when the old patterns whisper back. Maybe at a family gathering, when the drinks are flowing and the jokes are flying, and someone slides a glass toward you with that familiar grin. In those moments, the choice will feel heavy. It'll feel like you're choosing isolation. But you're not. You're choosing integrity. You're choosing to belong to yourself first. And here's the paradox. The more you do that, the less alone you feel. Because real connection, the kind that doesn't fade with the buzz, only happens when you show up fully. And that's exactly what you're learning to do. You'll start to notice things you never paid attention to before. How certain places feel heavy. How some conversations drain you, while others uplift you. That's your energetic field speaking. It's becoming sharper, more attuned. You'll recognize when a situation is lowering your frequency. And you'll have the clarity to step back. Not out of fear, but out of self-respect. You'll stop mistaking overexposure for openness. You'll learn the difference between lowering your guard and expanding your presence. One weakens you, the other strengthens you. And the more you live in this state, the more you'll see how deeply the world is still trapped. You'll notice how often people confuse numbing with freedom. How they chase temporary highs to escape the lows they refuse to face. But you won't need to run anymore. You'll be able to sit in the discomfort and listen. Not because it's easy, but because you understand now that discomfort isn't your enemy. It's your guide. Your energy will start to stabilize. The emotional swings will soften. The cravings for external validation will lose their grip. You'll find joy in the smallest things, a quiet morning, a clear breath, a genuine conversation. These aren't the dramatic highs the world sells you. They're better. They're real. They don't need to be amplified or filtered. They just are. And in that simplicity, you'll find a peace that no substance could ever provide. But here's the part no one talks about. The more present you become, the more you become a mirror. Your clarity will reflect back to others, often stirring something in them they didn't know was missing. Some will be drawn to it, curious, even inspired. Others might resist it, uncomfortable with what your presence awakens in them. That's not your burden to carry. You're not here to convince anyone. You're here to embody the truth you've reclaimed. And in doing so, you give silent permission for others to start their own journey, in their own time. You'll also realize how much of your life was shaped by the craving for something that was never external. The drinks, the distractions, the constant need to perform, they were never the source of your confidence or connection. They were temporary silences, masking the deeper conversation you were always meant to have with yourself. And now, that conversation is back, and it's louder, clearer, and more honest than it's ever been. With every step you take into this clarity, you become less reactive, more intentional. You stop mistaking noise for meaning. You choose your words carefully. Not because you're censoring yourself, but because you understand the power of your voice. You no longer feel the need to fill every silence. Because you're comfortable in your own company. And when you do speak, people listen, not because you're louder, but because your words carry the weight of presence. That's the power you're stepping into. Not the kind of power that dominates or controls, but the kind that radiates quietly, unshakably. The kind of power that comes from knowing who you are without needing external props to remind you. And the more you live in that power, the more immune you become to the system's attempts to pull you back into the fog. Their tactics won't work on you anymore. The ads, the social expectations, the subtle nudges, they'll feel hollow, transparent, because once you've tasted real freedom, the counterfeit version loses its appeal. But this journey isn't about perfection. It's not about never feeling the pull again. It's about building the resilience to choose differently, moment by moment, and with each choice, you fortify your energetic field. You repair the fractures. You become less porous, more sovereign, and as your field strengthens, so does your trust in yourself. You stop outsourcing your peace to substances or situations. You become your own source. You'll realize that the world doesn't need more numbed out, compliant men. It needs present ones, men who can stand in discomfort without running, men who can feel deeply without drowning, men who can lead not with force, but with clarity. That's the man you're becoming. And every small choice you make in that direction, every drink you refuse, every moment of stillness you embrace, adds up. It becomes a ripple, and those ripples, They change the world in ways loud revolutions never could. So here we are. No grand finale. No dramatic proclamation. Just a simple truth between two men who've seen enough of life to know that the real work isn't flashy. It's subtle. It's quiet. It's in the everyday moments when you choose to show up fully. Without the filters. Without the numbing. Without the need to escape. That's where sovereignty lives. That's where freedom breathes. And that's where you, my friend, are returning to.